We're joined now by Marc Short. He served as White House Legislative Affairs Director during the first Trump administration, and he was also Chief of Staff to former Vice President Mike Pence. He's currently Board Chair of Advancing American Freedom. So let's sort of fast forward from all of those sound bites, because Trump wrote on Truth Social, why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration? What do you think of quite a change in his rhetoric?
Yeah, it's quite an evolution, Brianna. I guess, if you had asked 6 months ago, in any governing coalition, there's going to be tension. If you'd asked where that tension would be, I would have said probably funding for Ukraine, a protectionist tariff policy. I wouldn't have expected to be on Jeffrey Epstein files. But it's been quite an evolution from just a couple months ago to saying that more or less these are prominent Democrat liberals who are involved in some sort of sex trafficking and we need to get to the bottom and release it, to saying the file's on my desk, to saying the files are in the folders given to a handful of social media influencers, to then saying there are no files, and to now saying who would want the files because they're actually been put together by Jim Comey, Hillary Clinton, and John Brennan and leftist Democrats. So that's quite an arc on that narrative in a very short amount of time. But, I think that a lot of Donald Trump supporters are people who have a healthy distrust of the government. And I think they look at it and they believe that he's going to unearth these things. But sometimes when you light the flame, it's hard to go from arsonist to firefighter on an issue like this.
Yeah, so how do you see historically here in the last few years, MAGA world, or let's say Trump, and those officials who hold a lot of power have tried to harness that suspicion of these folks who seem to care very much about there being a list of clients or what have you of Epstein's? How have they tried to channel that, perhaps over-promising?
Well, I think that the president is actually very good at that harnessing, as you say. He's often beta testing messages, whether or not it's in media interviews or on social media, to see what the reaction is and then to see what he wants to pursue. And I think that obviously this was a red-hot issue for a lot of people in the base, and so he leaned into it. But again, I think there were a lot of promises made that they seem unable to deliver on.
So we talked about, you mentioned Ukraine. You thought this would sort of be the tension point.
Yeah.
Okay, well, here we have this announcement today. And President Zelensky has just thanked President Trump for what he's doing, which is there's this 50 days for an economic punishment, basically. And then there's also the selling of weapons to NATO countries that can then provide them to Ukraine. And we just heard from the former ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. This is a big deal. He sees this as substantive. What do you think of this announcement from Trump and sort of the calculations he's now doing about Putin?
I think it is a big change. It is a big announcement. I think that, there's part of me, Brianna, that even though I welcome this, the reality is that, Putin has been he was a KGB officer, and he's always said he wants the reunification of the former Soviet Union. And so why it's taken this long is a question, and giving him an additional 50 days I don't like to see, because he'll probably just continue to pummel Ukraine for 50 days until you get to that mark. But look, it's a change in direction from the Trump administration that I think we should welcome. I think it's more consistent with where the first Trump administration was, and a very hard policy toward Russia that contained Russia. And so I think we do have to celebrate this change in direction. But I wish it wasn't a 50-day to give Russia the continued opportunity to continue to pummel Ukraine.
For Republicans who have taken issue with how much military aid has gone from the U.S. to Ukraine, do you think this threads the needle for them, sort of selling it to NATO allies who then provide it to Ukraine?
Well, again, I think even last year you saw Republicans continue to vote to support aid to Ukraine. So a lot of this, they do want to follow the president's direction, but left to their own devices, they do support helping Ukraine defend itself from aggression. I think that the president as well, I think there's been a change, because when he struck Iran, I think he deserves credit for that as well. Many of the isolation on his side criticized him. And so I think they've lost some of the influence perhaps they had in the administration. And maybe he's turning back to where he was in the first administration on foreign policy.
Do you think Trump finally has Putin's number? Like he finally understands maybe what motivates him and where he's going to go and where he isn't?
I don't know about that. I think he's probably just frustrated. He's frustrated that for this long he's tried to reach a peace deal, and I think he feels like he's been played, and so I think he's changing course. But I think we should celebrate that and welcome the change of direction.
We certainly heard that from Ambassador Taylor and other people who are happy to see this development, and President Zelensky, we should mention.
Of course.
Marc Short, great to have you. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Anna.
much.